Well, among today's images, what's happening in Central Java today, December 20th? Severe flooding continues to be reported in that region of the world. Also, well, in Malaysia, they are also reporting severe flooding. It's an issue that, they keep posting about on social media. This situation in some parts of South Asia, like in Kuala Lumpur, is also being shown. Well, this image. Let's listen to this moment of an attack on Pusat, a province in Cambodia. Let's listen. Let's listen there. Can you see any of the explosions? These explosions were caused by a Thai F-16 fighter jet, according to reports. Another image that is surprising is this one. 500 of Einstein's pages are completely blacked out. They erased them, all of them. They're not publishing the information as they should. At least 500 images, 500 pages with information are blacked out. There are some pages that only have one word, for example, Einstein, and everything else is blank. Erase the images, the photographs, also the pictures, all the people, everything is erased. There's nothing left. It's impressive. And well, obviously the judiciary isn't fulfilling its duty on this matter and could get into trouble because this should have been published yesterday. Also, another image that's surprising is, listen to this. According to what they report. Well, Portugal and Ukraine have made an agreement, another country that will be producing drones together with Ukraine. This time they assure that they will be producing underwater drones and drones in general to take advantage of the experience Ukraine has gained in that field. And on the other hand, the production capacity that Portugal has, I know that Portugal and Ukraine are working together on that matter. On the other hand, we also see Erdogan Viktor. Yes, Erdogan, the Turkish president.
The Turkish president again.
He assures this Erdogan assures. No country, crisis, struggle, or conflict. Are they intervening or getting involved? They say. We only want stability. We don't want to mess with anyone. We just want people to trust Turkey. Well, in order to do business, just to be able to. They say all this while there's a submarine in the background. I mean, many times images say more than words, but in the back, well, there's a submarine. There it is, as a witness to the words of peace spoken by Erdogan himself. And speaking of submarines, here's this surprising image of a submarine in the United States in one of the coldest corners of the planet. Take a look at how these submarines handle entering this kind of territory. Designed to operate silently, even for years, these submarines can surface even in completely frozen areas, as you can see. Well, that's a demonstration of these uses of the nuclear submarines that the United States has. On the other hand, check out this image. What you're seeing there is, well, a launch against a drone. A Ukrainian soldier reportedly shot down a Russian Shajete, obviously an unmanned drone, an unmanned aircraft, using an Igla man-portable air defense systems. Also, another image that, well, catches our attention today is this one. These are 8,000 people, 8,000 people in India who are asking for a chance to become National Guards. In the state of Odisha, there are so many people and only 187 will be selected that they had to do this at an airport. This is an airport runway where they sat everyone down with their sheets to fill out their information, their details, and the exams they're going to take. Of the 8,000, only 187 will be from Odisha's National Guard. Well, it's part of how a country selects the best in a certain area, especially countries with millions and millions of people. Well, the country with the largest population in the world, more than 1.4 billion people, that's an impressive number of people that India has. On the other hand, you can also see this image that was seen in Kyiv over there in the capital where a drone had a Russian flag. Someone infiltrated them, so be careful. I don't know their intention. In fact, at that point, right there, the drone starts to fall. It starts to fall and collapses. Well, that's something that also draws attention today. Another image, this one comes from Venezuela. Listen to the following.
Same. These are equipped with their special compartment for transporting and mobilizing the brothers from the special forces.
Diosdado Cabello then delivers this message. the chief of torture in Venezuela, Franco Arteaga, or as many know him, the chief of torture. Well, he basically tells him that he has to go operate against opposition members inside and outside the country. He says national and international terrorism. Now that's what Diosdado Cabello calls it. On the other hand, these images are also surprising. Mountains and mountains in China. What's surprising about these solar panels is the scale of energy they want to get from the sun. Well, based on these panels, no. In these areas, in these mountains, well, they've ended up completely covered with this type of panel. Honestly, it really is surprising. Now, how much energy is it actually providing? For China, wouldn't this be an interesting question? Also, well, today this image of a pilot who decided to protest is being shared on social media. And basically, what you say once all the passengers are inside? Well, I'm not going to fly until they pay me my 5 months of salary, right? And he says, man, I feel really bad. I'm really sorry, but they haven't paid me for 5 months, you know? A Magni charter pilot who apparently, besides it seeming like it was his last flight, something like that. Well, the thing is that obviously it's not the people's fault, right? People were upset because after boarding, they were told at the last minute there was no flight. And I also say, well, how is it possible that they haven't been paid, right? That's also terrible on the part of Magni Charter. But I also say, what fault does the people have, right? People are obviously upset. I'm not saying otherwise. I get that the pilot wants support, but we don't know how urgent the trip might be for some people, right? So, well, that's also a bit of a tough situation. And another image that has surprised people is this one. What's this about? Have they been? Has Russia's advance been so slow up to 2025 that it allowed the Ukrainians to do what you're seeing? Yes, what you're seeing here. It's a fortification along the entire line across 6 regions, and they built one fortification and then another. That's why it has several layers. They made a double fortification for miles and miles and miles and miles in Ukraine because, well, let's go. To prevent future advances, they're already preparing these fortifications that, well, go on for miles, he says. Russia's slow advance has allowed Ukraine to finish fortifying the entire front line across 6 regions. And they did it with a double fortification. Even today, work continues to extend these fortifications over more kilometers as they keep spreading further and further. Well, that's also part of what's being done. And well, let's get to the information. Let's see what's happening. Just one more image before we move on to the news, to the reports. Do you remember this image that apparently shows the helicopter where an unidentified flying object appears? This object that appears there, right? Well, specialists have been reviewing it and they claim that this object seems to have some kind of hot propulsion, which it doesn't. Obviously, it doesn't have the characteristics of a plane or a jet or anything like that, but they say it has a much more intense heat signature than an F-15. This, according to the forensic study that has been done on the image. Whatever this object is, an object that apparently is kind of disc-shaped, a helicopter didn't get very close to it. This was in November 2024. Here we are telling you about this report that was released just a few months ago. The information was there, but there was no image. Now, supposedly, this is the image. I say supposedly because they haven't wanted to confirm this image leak. But the specialists who have studied it say, well, there's a heat signature here. This is because it's an infrared image, so it detects heat. And the thing is, it's about calculating how much heat this object is generating, and the heat signature is greater than that of an F-15. So, well, obviously that draws attention to the thing that's being investigated. This one has, let's say, all the seals, the logos, the classic characteristics of the English police, which is where this situation supposedly happened. But anyway, those are some of today's images and what has caught my attention the most. But let's move on to other matters because there's some very, very interesting information. They say that Tokyo and Japan in general are preparing for a super earthquake, for a mega earthquake. It's not that they have a specific date, they just know it's going to happen, not just one, but there are several possibilities. There are several faults that they are currently preparing for, even with infrastructure. The estimate they have for the earthquake they're expecting, which could happen tomorrow or in 30 years. In other words, nobody knows. But that's the estimate. That's the range they have. They say it could cause 18,000 human losses, and that's just from the earthquake itself. So, on day one, it's bad, and that's not even counting what could come after. They say that a powerful earthquake with a high probability could occur under specifically Tokyo sometime between now and the next 3 decades. According to the report by Damaishini, it's the most recent and most thoroughly studied prediction so far, according to what they say. Today, Friday the 20th, yesterday the 19th of December, the Japanese government published this situation in which the projection they show is, as they say, concerning. The progress is attributed to the fact that buildings have been constructed in that area, which, in theory, should have the necessary anti-seismic and fire prevention measures. But nevertheless, there are other buildings that do not have those features. They say that one of the most important problems in the event of an earthquake in Tokyo is that fire would be the main threat, not so much the shaking itself, but the fire that breaks out afterwards. Since there are many wooden buildings, the warnings come in the context of Japan currently stepping up its preparations. The plans are for an event that they say is simply inevitable. In other words, it's going to happen. The previous estimate was 23,000 people dead, but they have managed to improve the infrastructure of buildings in some areas. And the projection went from 23,000 people lost to 18,000. If it were to happen today, what they intend is that in the coming years, the projection will be less and less risky. They are looking to improve infrastructure and prevention, and with that, reduce the projected fatalities. The increase in the number of buildings constructed to withstand earthquakes. The implementation of fire prevention measures, especially in districts with a high density of wooden houses. These are the vulnerable areas. They're working on that too. What will be the main risk? The biggest risk isn't the immediate collapse of the buildings, as I mentioned, but rather the report clarifies that the main risk is actually fires. Compared to 2013, that's a reduction of 5,000 people, meaning 5,000 fewer would die. Observe how the Japanese carefully plan and develop ideas over decades. According to the reports, it's projected that there would be 8,000 deaths just in the capital and another 10,000 outside the capital. The massive displacement could reach up to 4.8 million people who would be evacuated in the following weeks, so they wouldn't be in high-risk areas. 4.8 million. If it happens at noon, if it happens at noon, more people would be trapped. 18.4 million people would be trapped and unable to return home, including hundreds of thousands of tourists. There is also talk of material damage to 2,000 buildings which would either collapse or catch fire. That's a tremendous number, isn't it? The economic costs are estimated at 82.6 trillion yen, which would be $530 billion. What would this be, assuming it was the worst-case scenario? Also, for the first time, the possible number of deaths that could occur in the area after the earthquake has been reported. I mean, not the earthquake itself, but what happened after. And here they include between 16,000 and 41,000 additional people who would die days or weeks later due to fires, accidents, or other situations. The projection is impressive, right? Suddenly, yes, these things must be done, even though such reports are very tough. But, for example, it's not clear to me what the projection is in Mexico City. What's the projection in Bueno in California? Yes, actually, we've seen that one and we've talked about it here. That one is very clear. The Federal Emergency Management Agency thing. We'd need to see what happens with Chile, which has this projection. What about Peru, Ecuador, the countries that are seismic all along the Pacific, Latin America? What about Taiwan and the countries in the Pacific, Indonesia? What projections do they use? Them? No. But what they're talking about is not just making a projection of the earthquake, but also of what happens after the earthquake, to avoid and to prevent. and to invest more in how to take care of that issue. The government response assures that Japan plans to update emergency protocols, reinforce buildings, and create a new disaster management agency, that is for the next year, 2026. The type of analysis the Japanese government insists is not to cause alarm, but to serve as a guide to be able to prioritize actions in the event of a situation like this. And the fact that they publish it to the public is also so that people are aware in case a problem occurs. So, certain priorities and protocols have to be established, and if an evacuation is requested, then people have to act accordingly. The situation is quite serious. Now, another point, since we're talking about seismic studies, there's an interesting study being conducted in the Suez Canal or the Gulf of Suez. A study claims that there is a tectonic fault separating Africa from Asia and that it is still active and widening every year. I'm sure it reports that. The geoscience team, led by David Fernandez Blanco, discovered that the Gulf of Suez, historically considered a tectonically inactive area, is still expanding at a rate of 55 millimeters per year. This expansion, although minimal to the human eye, has seismic implications, even geopolitical and maritime, and profound ones. Yes, we're talking about this region of the world. Let me come in here on the screen. It's this area. Here it is. Let's see if you can see it here on the map. Here it is. Yes, here it is. Everything is safe. This is the famous Suez Canal, which reveals that there is a geological movement here when it was thought that there was practically none. Published in Geophysical Research Letter, the discovery confirms the fault dividing Africa and Asia. The fault is still active. Though slow, its activity is constant, according to the report. The elevation of fossil coral terraces, over 400,000 years old, now 18 meters above sea level. This can only be explained by tectonic movements. So, in light of this, in light of these topographic deformations, they clarify that, of course, there is movement. Recently, by the way, shallow earthquakes have been identified. This reinforces the hypothesis that there is tension building up in this region of the world, a region that could surprise us at any time. Well, that's the situation. Let's move on to other important information. They claim that Russia is preparing moves against the Baltic countries. Ukrainian intelligence has evidence, and the head of intelligence published it today. They have evidence that the aggression Russia was planning against the Baltic countries for 2030 has been moved up. 2 years? 3 years? Sorry, it would be 27. I mean, it would be 2027. So basically in a year, since we're almost in 2026, basically in a year. The head of Ukrainian military intelligence warns that Moscow has already advanced its aggression from Europe in 2030 to 2027 against Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. At risk, says Kirilo Budanov, head of Ukrainian intelligence at the main intelligence directorate. Let's say Russia is no longer considering aggression for 2030, but have they moved it forward? This is also because the Russians see that Europe is starting to prepare, and if they wait too long, Europe will be ready, to be able to face them. It's not that they don't have strength, it's just that right now, at this very moment, they have more soldiers, they're better prepared, and they have a bigger budget. Is that true now? Yes, but be careful. There are certain details where there is no preparation. For example, the ammunition, all the ammunition made by Europe, Russia makes it in just 1 month, what Europe makes in a year, all of NATO together. Yes, Russia is making it in a month. So there are certain elements, certain points where the Europeans have weaknesses, especially Europe. We're not counting, I mentioned NATO, but we're not counting the United States because the United States does produce a bit faster. The thing is, well, they're not preparing at the speed that's expected. What does Budanov say? What he claims is that the Kremlin has already designed a strategy as a result of the establishment of Ukraine, and he sees the Western and European flank as the weakest to fulfill his imperialist ambitions while avoiding a direct confrontation. In the north and east, due to fear of a United States and NATO response, and in the south, because of Chinese influence. Moscow believes that Europe is divided and vulnerable. That's what Moscow thinks about Europe. The most striking thing is that Poland is not among the occupation targets. Although it would be a target of attacks to put pressure on Poland, it would be attacking Poland as well, but without invading Poland. These three countries would be invaded: Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. Poland would not be invaded, but it would be attacked so that it doesn't get involved in the matter. Well, at least that's the analysis made by intelligence. The same Buddha who, by the way, has been very accurate in his reports since the war began. We've been following this person, and what he has warned about has been coming true. So, well, we'll see if this happens too, though of course anything can happen. Another noteworthy issue is also occurring. A new ballistic attack by Russia has left at least 8 people dead and 27 injured, according to reports from the early hours of today, Saturday, December 20. Russia launched another devastating ballistic missile attack on port infrastructure, this time hitting Odessa. That is the area Russia has been focusing on tonight. In this area, this port that faces the Black Sea is the one that has been under attack. Based on available information and firefighter reports, they had the target of the shots was the port of Pideveni or something like that. It is one of the most important ports for grain exports from Ukraine, and it causes fires in vehicles parked in the affected area. The Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine, Olesny Kuleva, reportedly said and confirmed that the attack was carried out using these ballistic missiles that bombarded the region. Without stopping for quite a while, both officials assured that measures are being taken. The duration of the attack is unclear, but he says it was lengthy. Prime Minister Yulia Sidorenko stated that the government is strengthening road and rail routes while coordinating with Moldova to establish alternative routes and temporary shelters at border crossings. It's also important for that to be developed now. On the other hand, right there, very close by, just as they were attacking here, Ukraine was attacking over there towards Crimea, and it was a strong blow. According to reports, drone attacks on the Russian airfield in Belbek destroyed one Su-27 and damaged another and compromised the control tower. In the midst of the military escalation, Ukraine carried out a new and forceful plan, they say, against this military airfield. They repeatedly claim the offensive was led by the Security Service of Ukraine. The SBU directly hit two Su-27s. One was completely destroyed and the other was damaged. The control tower was compromised, which is vital for coordinating military flights. The attack occurred early today, December 20th. It happened simultaneously. While they attacked here, Ukraine was already under attack elsewhere. That's how the war is now. By the way, Russia and China are sharpening their bombers near Japan and Alaska. While this is happening at quite a distance, there have been movements like bombers in this area. We have to remember that this part is Russia here as well, and here is Japan, and over here is China. So, in this area, China and Russia have been flying bombers and have intensified their military cooperation through a 10th Joint Air Patrol. This includes bombers, including models with nuclear capability, flying near Japan and look near Alaska in this area. Yes, so, according to what Newsweek reports, these patrols, so to speak, are not just symbolic flights, but clearly have a tactical purpose. According to the military analysts who have been consulted, this represents a political message from Moscow and China towards Japan and the United States. The exercise involved Russian T-125 MS bombers capable of carrying nuclear missiles and Chinese H-6 bombers, including the H-6N for the first time. Also, it's a version equipped to carry nuclear ballistic missiles, the Julang-1. The flight route also attracted attention because it included the Miyako Strait, part of Japan's air defense zones, and the south. It also highlighted areas near Alaska where United States and Canadian planes intercepted the formation without incident. Did the United States get closer? To tell them, well, move over, right? Basically, this development marks the first time that Russian and Chinese forces are operating together beyond East Asia, even over this area, over the Bering Sea. Yes, there have been operations taking place in all these areas in recent days. It's important to remember that Japan is a key ally of the United States. Look, the United States has 60,000 soldiers in the region, 60,000 soldiers in Japan. That's not a small thing. Obviously, this move draws a lot of attention. It's a topic that's part of this new kind of Cold War that's happening between these countries. $20 million young people from Generation Z in China, 20 million are currently unemployed. In this 2025, over 20 million urban Chinese Gen Z youth are unemployed according to analysis from the same official Chinese data, right? It could actually be more, but that's what the official data says. This represents at least 12% of that group, although the real number could be much higher. Young people aged 15 to 24 were most affected, with a 17% unemployment rate in November. And, well, the 25 to 29 age range has an unemployment rate of 7%, right? The most concerning one, let's say, is that of the youngest. China changed its statistical methodology last year and stopped counting. For example, students, people working under an hour weekly, and young people not seeking jobs. That is removed. So if you're not looking for a job, if according to the government you're not looking for a job, then they don't count you. So the number could be much higher because maybe there are people who already spent some time looking and didn't find anything. And so they got tired and are looking for other ways to make money, and they're no longer officially looking. So they're no longer counted as unemployed. Is the number being handled poorly? But it shows that there's a latent problematic situation there that could become a future problem for China. Obviously, it's an important issue. Listen, by the way, yesterday there was the confrontation between this Jake Paul, who's a YouTuber, and Anthony Joshua, a professional boxer. No, even though Jake Paul has tried to show that he's trained. This and that. Well, the reality is that it's not the same to be a professional and world champion and another thing to be a YouTuber who trained, right? It's totally valid for them to train as much as they want, but going up against a world champion, well, that's tough. In a blow-for-blow fight, honestly, maybe one or two could do it. Joshua, if you saw the fight, and the one who landed the last punch, the one who knocked him out, the one who hit him directly on the jaw, broke it twice, the jaw has two fractures, let's say, on the jaw, this Jake Paul. Not even. The boxer, this Joshua, was totally fine. Not at all. He wasn't even breathing heavily. It actually looked like he was just playing, right? Is he really okay? Yeah, it was proof that, and look, here's the picture of Quijada and how he ended up. He apparently has a fracture on that side and a small fracture on the left side. For now, the Florida Athletic Commission has given Jake Paul a mandatory 60-day suspension for knockout. That's the rule. If you get knocked out, it's 60 days straight without being able to fight. Because he was already saying, yeah, who's next? Now I'm going to fight this Canelo and I don't know what else. Well, that's how it is, right? That's how it is. So in the end, it was just a pretty boring fight, right? But well, what everyone expected, and the reason many people watched the fight, was because they specifically wanted to see Paul get knocked out. Honestly, right? He built a really annoying character himself, and that's part of his persona. It's part of that style he has, right? And yeah, people liked it. I think that was really it, right? the 6th round, and in the first 2 rounds, they did almost nothing, right? I mean, he kept running, and then he would throw himself on the floor for everyone. He would throw himself on the floor, I don't know what, and he would throw himself. Yeah, look, the fight is pretty funny. It's boring, but also funny at the same time. He would throw himself on the floor and throw himself on the floor. I mean, it was boring in the sense that there wasn't anything else. There weren't any punches, right? That's what you're supposed to see in boxing, isn't it? But, well, that's how things are. On that matter, which I also meant to tell you about last night, well, we managed to talk a little bit, but the fight hasn't been helped. By the way, another matter that also draws attention, well, from these terrible situations that happened, this one is in India. It is reported that a train ran over seven baby elephants over there. Well, unfortunately, they lost their lives. According to the report, a train ran over a herd of elephants. Even though the accident caused 5 train cars to derail, no passengers were injured. But yes, 7 elephants died as they were obviously run over by the train. This happened in northeast India, where a passenger train collided with a herd of elephants, according to authorities. This happened today, Saturday, December 20th. No passengers were injured in the accident. Well, that's the situation. It says the driver saw the group of elephants and activated the emergency brake immediately. And even so, the collision couldn't be avoided. Right? According to data from Parliament, 699 people have lost their lives in accidents involving elephants across India. Since 2023 and 2024, collisions with elephants have become common, not only with trains, but also other transportation types. Well, that's how things are in India, right? I mean, as I said, it's a world full of people over there, isn't it? By the way, another thing that also stands out in all of this, in everything geopolitical, Vladimir Putin is once again threatening Europe with more wars. And, well, that narrative he used to have that he wasn't going to attack Europe is now completely gone. Putin is again discussing this possibility. They say very general things like, if they don't respect us, war. If this happens, war. If that happens, war. I mean, well, he demands that NATO withdraw its defenses to the German border and leave everything unprotected, and just leave it unprotected. That they leave unprotected the nations that joined after 1997. I mean, the nations that entered NATO after 97, that there shouldn't be anyone from NATO there. Just because he wants to, right? Because in the end, these are countries that have the right to defend themselves, or have the right to have. No, it's no. Either they back off or they're going to be attacked. That's the threat there is. So, for example, Sweden, which just recently joined, Finland, which just recently joined NATO, well, no, Estonia, Lithuania, and all those countries either. I mean, it's pretty intense, isn't it? That's something that gets built little by little, right? The narrative of using a conflict as a pretext, and then that narrative spreads through the propaganda media. And you're going to start seeing this whole approach they're going to take to justify a conflict now with Europe, or specifically with NATO, right? And then they'll say these were the ones to blame, when actually the threat comes from over there. That's why some generals are already insisting that a move needs to be made first. You know what they say? He who strikes first strikes twice, right? Anyway, we'll see. Meanwhile, the drums of war are beating. What's happening with the images that were supposed to be released by those involved in the Einstein case? No, those are the images. You can download them there. The files are public. They're available to download, okay? Black sheet, a little letter, black sheet, a little letter. I mean, yes, there are a lot of documents. There are some pages that do have some information, but over 500 pages are completely blacked out. The Department of Justice released thousands of new records yesterday, Friday, about the confessed and convicted criminal Jeffrey Einstein. And now he's gone, right? At least 550 pages of the documents are fully redacted. And other pages also have blacked out sections, right? The recently released files included photos of several prominent people from Einstein's circle, images of their homes, and investigation records detailing disturbing allegations against the late assailant. However, the extensive censorship in many of the records has drawn criticism from both Democrats and Republicans, while the Department of Justice defends its handling of the files. A series of 3 consecutive documents, totaling 255 pages, are completely censored, with each page covered by a black box. A 4th document of 119 pages is also like that. Well, it's a series of folders and folders and folders with blacked out sections, or completely blacked out like what we're seeing. This is almost comedic, right? If it weren't something so serious, honestly, this is just, well, how? I mean, yesterday when I saw this, I thought it was the meme where they say, this is what they're taking from Einstein, and thought, oh, what a good meme. But no, it's not a meme. I mean, this is how they were taking it out. They've been taking it out like this. So obviously, right? Well, they don't want to spread it. They don't want to. Come on. The only thing they were asked is to remove the victims' names. Yes, that's all. And they said, well, also the politicians, and well, also I don't know what, and also I don't know how much. And after a while, well, they ended up covering everything. Ha ha ha. It's clear there's no intention to provide information, and none will be given. The conclusions of the United States Department of Justice, from what they have published, is that, well, they made a partial disclosure. That's what they say. This is partial information. You say, well, haha. Well, that's how things are, right? That's the situation. In the meantime, let's move on to other topics. Look, here's something that's happening. How is this idea going to work? This Golden Dome project, it's not this idea of a missile defense perfection system for the United States. That would be very expensive. Well, it's estimated that it would be even more expensive than a full-scale war. I mean, if there were a war, this project would be much more expensive. Donald Trump launches his Golden Dome to shield the United States from the world. Trump's new anti-missile shield would cost $1.1 trillion. That's a million, not a billion. And it proposes a military revolution, although at the same time they say it has no guarantee of success. So you ask how and why? Donald Trump launched one of his most ambitious second-term initiatives, creating the unprecedented anti-missile system Golden Dome, inspired by Israel's Iron Dome, but with much greater range and complexity. The White House presents it as a total defensive wall to protect the United States from any aerial attack, from drones to intercontinental nuclear missiles. The plan includes a multi-layered defense network, from ground-to-air interceptors to space-based weaponry that doesn't even exist yet. Weaponry existing only in some engineers' and scientists' imaginations. But it hasn't been tested, and no one knows if it works or not. As far as we know, the system could be built initially with $175 billion for the first phase, and it would be ready in 2029. However, according to independent analysis, when they did the actual calculations to reach the minimum desired range, it would have to cost $1.1 trillion. That's a trillion, over 500 more than the administration projects. In short, it would be extremely expensive, according to their report. On the other hand, another topic that also draws attention is that the new military chief of the Southern Command has already been nominated. He's already been nominated, and well, this is also an important part of what's happening. He has introduced himself to this gentleman who is Francis L. Donovan. Yes, he is the Lieutenant General of the Marine Corps, Francis L. Donovan, who would be the new head of the Southern Command. Reports say the general was proposed as Southern Command head during a Caribbean military escalation, and they warned that he would be a very tough figure. They say it's a move of high geopolitical voltage. We're going to say no. I mean, they're thinking that an operation, a conflict with Venezuela is going to happen. And for that, they had to change generals because the other one didn't really agree with the way they were operating. But it seems this gentleman would agree, right? That's at least the proposal. Congress has to accept it, right? The Pentagon insists that the actions are aimed at trafficking networks, especially the Los Soles cartel, which according to Washington is linked to Nicolas Maduro's regime. The operations have reportedly already left more than 100 people dead, also increasing international pressure and internal criticism, even within the military chambers, and also within Congress. Secretary of State Marco Rubio called the Caracas situation intolerable and vowed a tough stance on the sanctioned vessels. Meanwhile, the United Nations Civil Council also called an emergency session to address the escalating Venezuela-United States crisis. So, there are also some interesting things coming up that we will be analyzing, and we will also be detailing the moment when any operation takes place, because in theory it is about to happen. The United States also claims, since we're talking about the United States right now, it claims that there will be no peace in Gaza as long as Hamas exists. The United States warns that they must completely disarm and cease to exist as a group. That is essential for any lasting solution in the region. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said peace is impossible as long as the group operates and remains armed, since this clearly cannot continue. Phase 2, which is the part about the withdrawal of Israeli forces. It will last until they disarm and that group ceases to exist. The statement was made during a press conference in Washington, while Steve Witkoff himself, the United States envoy, is in the second phase of peace talks with Qatar. Egypt and Turkey are there, meeting with these three countries in order to reach a peace agreement. Let's hope it's positive and that it happens soon, because that's the situation. Well, it's still very serious. The situation remains serious. I mean, for the civilians who can't recover because the group is still operating there and there are still strong tensions. How have you been? Hope you're well and enjoying the weekend. Thank you so much to the whole community that's supporting us. Good afternoon. The night. We will be here broadcasting with great pleasure, and there will surely be broadcasts during the afternoon from the street, from outside. We will be keeping an eye out. Now, which part? Earthquakes can be predicted. Don't you understand? Because who said earthquakes could be predicted, huh? Alessandra, did someone tell me about it or what? Stay? No, I don't know. But well, nobody said that here, right? I mean, in any case, what can be predicted is that it will happen within a certain period of time. You can't predict the exact time or day for that. Obviously not, right? That's been very clear from the beginning, right? We've said it here. Well, greetings, Alessandra. She might not know the channel I ran out. I'm not sure. Oh, she's talking to someone else, she says. Hi, Fernando. How are you? Very good. Elisa, how have you been? She says greetings and thanks for the intro. How are you, Sadi? Also Roble Wilkoff. Who else is out there? Angel Monica Panterita. Irma, how are you doing? Leticia, how have you been, Leti? Merry Christmas, Letty. It's so nice to see you here. Merry Christmas. Hope you're all well. Happy New Year, right? Says Verderi. Greetings to everyone. I just saw a news story about drug dealers in Mexico City complaining that police and authorities demanded weekly payments to allow them to sell. Imagine that. I mean, it's not the first time I've heard about this, you know? I mean, a criminal goes and reports a situation. I remember one that happened in the United States. A criminal went to the police because a client didn't want to pay him because he had sold him illegal substances. Let's say no. He goes to the police and they ask, what were you selling him? He says no, then yes, but that's illegal. So jail? No. Prison? No, then yes. Just imagine. Well, greetings. What's up? How are you all doing? He says, greetings. Okay, yeah, that's really crazy, Verderi. Yeah. It's not the first time I've heard that. Hey, well, look, I'm saying goodbye. We'll be back in a little while. There's a report about Atlas that we're going to talk about in a little bit, the comet, an update, and, well, some other topics too. So we'll see you in a bit. We're going to broadcast from, well, wherever we are. We'll keep talking. Have an excellent weekend. And tonight we'll keep chatting here. A big hug. See you later.
Thank you for watching the PP News Live, where the events of planet Earth and the secrets of outer space are analyzed like nowhere else. Thank you for subscribing.